You walk into a hospital room with machines monitoring every heartbeat, a trained doctor within reach, and an emergency surgery option available if anything goes wrong. Even with all of that, childbirth still terrifies people, still gets talked about in hushed, careful tones by people who have been through it. Strip away the machines, the doctor, the hospital walls entirely, and you are left with something your ancestors faced directly, again and again, generation after generation, with nothing but each other. Human childbirth is unusually dangerous compared to almost every other species on the planet, and the reason is written directly into your skeleton, inherited long before you had any say in the matter. Anthropologists Wenda Trevathan of New Mexico State University and Karen Rosenberg of the University of Delaware spent years developing what is now called the obstetrical dilemma, a framework explaining why human birth is so uniquely difficult compared to nearly every other primate. Walking upright on two legs reshaped the human pelvis into a narrower, more compact structure built for efficient walking. At the same time, evolution was pushing human brains, and therefore infant skulls, to grow larger and larger, favoring babies born with the mental hardware to survive an increasingly complicated world. Those two pressures work directly against each other. A pelvis built for walking efficiently and a skull built for holding a bigger brain do not fit together easily, and the result is a species where a baby's head barely squeezes through the birth canal, even under ideal conditions. Trevathan's research went further than just identifying the problem. She proposed something she called the midwife hypothesis, the idea that because of this exact anatomical squeeze, human mothers likely could not safely give birth completely alone the way most other mammals do. A human infant is typically born facing away from the mother, making it physically difficult for her to reach down, clear the baby's airway, or guide the delivery herself without assistance. Trevathan argued that some form of help during birth, whether from a trained specialist or simply an experienced woman nearby, may be close to universal across human history, not a modern medical convenience, but a biological necessity baked into how difficult human anatomy makes the whole process. Cross-cultural evidence backs this up directly. Anthropologist Brigitte Jordan spent years documenting birth practices across dramatically different societies for her influential study Birth in Four Cultures, comparing childbirth traditions in the Yucatan, Holland, Sweden, and the United States. Despite enormous differences in technology, belief systems, and medical infrastructure between these groups, Jordan found one consistent thread running through every single culture she studied. Nowhere did she find a tradition of women giving birth entirely alone by choice. Some form of attendance, whether a trained midwife, an older female relative, or a small group of experienced women, showed up again and again as close to a cultural universal, appearing independently in societies that had no historical contact with each other. In the Yucatan, Jordan observed a young mother surrounded by her own mother, her mother-in-law, and a local midwife all present in the same small room, each contributing a different kind of knowledge and reassurance throughout labor. In hospital settings in the United States and Sweden, that same instinct simply took a different shape, formalized into medical staff, monitoring equipment, and a partner present at the bedside instead of a circle of female relatives. But the underlying pattern, nobody expected to do this completely alone, remained exactly the same. The fossil record adds a haunting layer of confirmation to just how real this danger was. At a site called Ostuni in southern Italy, archaeologists uncovered a burial dating back roughly 28,000 years, containing the remains of a young woman found alongside the skeleton of a full-term fetus still positioned inside her pelvis. Researchers examining the remains identified signs consistent with obstructed labor, meaning the delivery itself likely became fatal, killing both mother and child in a single event. Analysis of the young woman's bones suggested she was likely still a teenager or in her very early 20s, a reminder that this danger was not something that only threatened older or repeat mothers, but could end the very first pregnancy a young woman ever carried. The burial was treated with clear care, red ochre pigment and shell ornaments placed with the body, suggesting the community that buried her understood exactly what had been lost and marked it accordingly. Nothing about the burial suggests panic or abandonment. Someone stayed long enough afterward to prepare a grave, select ornaments, and apply pigment with intention. Picture what surviving pregnancy and birth actually required day to day, not just during the delivery itself. Anthropologist Frank Marlowe of Durham University spent years studying reproduction among the Hadza, a hunter-gatherer community in Tanzania, documenting how pregnant and nursing women adjusted their daily routines around the demands of their changing bodies. Marlowe's research found that pregnant Hadza women continued gathering food well into pregnancy, but shifted toward less physically demanding tasks and closer foraging ranges as their due date approached, relying more heavily on other women in the group to cover the gaps left by what they could no longer manage alone. After birth, extended breastfeeding, sometimes continuing for several years, naturally spaced out how frequently a woman could become pregnant again, a biological rhythm that shaped not just individual families, but the size and structure of the entire group over time. Here's the twist worth sitting with. Modern pregnancy is often treated as an individual medical event, something one woman and her doctor manage largely in isolation, tracked privately through appointments and apps, sometimes announced to the wider world only once it feels safe enough to share. But the anatomical squeeze Trevathan and Rosenberg identified suggests the opposite was true for nearly all of human history. Pregnancy and birth were never meant to be a solitary undertaking, quietly managed and privately endured. The narrow human pelvis essentially forced cooperation into the equation from the very beginning, making childbirth one of the clearest physical proofs that human beings evolved as a fundamentally social species. Your body is shaped by millions of years of assuming someone else would be there when it mattered most, that a second set of hands, a second set of eyes, would be close enough to help the moment things became difficult. That assumption runs deeper than most people realize. Even the instinct to seek out an experienced older woman for advice during a first pregnancy, something that still happens constantly today, may be an echo of exactly the pattern Jordan documented across every culture she studied. The specific words have changed. The specific setting has changed entirely, from a hut to a hospital room. But the basic shape of the behavior, gathering knowledgeable company around the most physically demanding event a human body ever attempts, appears to be something your species simply never learned to do any other way. You walk into a hospital room with machines monitoring every heartbeat, a trained doctor within reach, and an emergency option available if anything goes wrong. That entire setup, however modern it looks, is really just the latest version of an arrangement your species has relied on since long before hospitals existed, since long before writing existed, since a young woman in what is now Italy was buried 28,000 years ago with her child still inside her, mourned by people who understood, without needing anyone to explain it to them, exactly how much had been asked of her body and how much had been lost. Whoever is in the room with you when it matters most, whether that is a midwife, a partner, a mother, or a nurse checking a monitor every few minutes, they are standing in for an arrangement older than almost anything else your species does together. Long before anyone wrote down why it mattered, the answer was already built into the shape of the human pelvis itself. If stories like this one make you see your own everyday life differently, hit subscribe. A new story from the deep past goes up every week.